Libya and Lebanon are very different. Yet they witness common challenges with freedom of expression, violations and intimidations against independent media and critical voices, the spread of hate speech and disinformation, and restriction of fundamental civil liberties. Clampdowns on media and activists by state and non-state actors aim to repress dissenting voices, intimidate critics, and fuel division or fear. To all these challenges, civil society is responding with Free Voices, a SWAT horror, a joint Libyan-Lebanese initiative that aims to protect, empower, and connect democratic voices in Libya, Lebanon, and the whole region. Free Voices, a SWAT horror, builds resilience to threats to freedom of expression. Since 2019, 10 CSOs have implemented projects to support journalists, activists and citizens in Libya and Lebanon, and have synthesized the most pressing issues that require a policy response. First, amending key legislation to enhance freedom of expression and of assembly. In Libya, widespread violence and insecurity deters citizens from assembling. The government has prerogatives to restrict fundamental civil liberties. Attacking or detaining critics and closing down media outlets are a common practice. The law on combating cybercrime affects freedom of expression. There is no legislation that protects the reputation and privacy of individuals rather than those of the state and its institutions. Politicians and public figures should accept criticism more than the ordinary citizens. All legislative pieces should comply with the standards for freedom of expression. Restrictions on freedom of expression should be eased, and civil society should be consulted when laws are drafted or amended. A safe environment that protects journalists and activists should be created. Second, creating a legal basis for the protection of journalists and for curbing hate speech. Crimes against journalists and activists in Libya are in constant increase, while the security and judicial institutions are unable to effectively prosecute the perpetrators. There are no legal protection of the journalistic profession, and a legal framework to regulate the highly polarized media sector. Often, media fuel hate speech and incite to violence. Progress to adopting a new press and publications law, establishing a Supreme Council for Media and Press, and adopting a journalistic code of conduct has been slow. The restrictions on media, designed to shield authorities from criticism, should be lifted, and the state institutions should work to create conditions for a pluralistic media system. A robust legal framework should be developed to define the public and private media's statutes, functions, and operations. The journalists' rights should be adequately protected, including by a media syndicate. The public media should be granted with editorial and financial independence to work for the public interest. Third, Libya, enhancing women's presence and participation in the media beyond traditional stereotypes. The presence of women in the Libyan media has expanded, but their growing number does not guarantee an engagement in defending women's causes. Women's topics are still missing in news coverage, and women are far from being empowered in the media workforce. TV and radio political talk shows tend to invite male commentators, even if some political parties decount female members in their ranks. Libyan women's insecurity, the conservative social stereotypes, and the deepening economic crisis are the key challenges to gender equality. A gender assessment of the legislation should be conducted to identify gaps and recommend amendments. When drafting laws, the legislators should provide for an adequate representation of women in all sectors, including the media. The new Libyan constitution should specifically define the principle of equality. The Free Voices, a SWAT horror initiative, is led by 10 active civil society organizations, operating in Libya and Lebanon. The Free Voices partners work to raise public awareness among citizens, decision-makers and the international community about the most pressing issues with freedom of expression that require a policy response. They put the proposed recommendations to the forefront of political debate in Libya and Lebanon. More details about the issues with freedom of expression in Libya and Lebanon can be found in the special publication by the Free Voices, a SWAT horror initiative. Free Voices, a SWAT horror is supported by the Institute for War and Peace Reporting, IWPR, Reporters Without Borders, RSF, Media Defense Initiative, and Binda Consulting International, BCI, with UK aid funding.